Breaking. A dramatic new clash is unfolding at the heart of London's power structure, with reports claiming King Charles has stepped in to override Mayor Sadiq Khan in what observers are already calling one of the most explosive constitutional confrontations the capital has faced in modern times. What happened next, sources say, left the mayor visibly furious and scrambling to contain the political fallout. The palace is said to have leaned on authority most people assumed was symbolic or long dormant, and insiders are describing the decision as a red line moment, one with consequences that could reshape how Britain defines power, tradition, and accountability. If you want to track how this political earthquake develops, subscribe to UK Housing Insight now, because the next move in this standoff could stun the country. Here's what allegedly set this unprecedented crisis alight. At 9:47 a.m. yesterday, reports say King Charles took a step that shattered decades of convention with a single decisive intervention. A formal letter, delivered directly to City Hall through official channels, landed like a hammer. Those briefed on the contents describe it as calm in tone, but brutal in implication, measured words carrying unmistakable force. The message, according to sources, was simple. The direction of London's current leadership was being framed as incompatible with the security and well-being of British citizens. It wasn't a public speech, it wasn't a vague warning, it was reportedly a direct rebuke. But City Hall did not absorb the blow quietly. Instead of a carefully worded diplomatic reply designed to cool tensions, the response that followed was described as combative, so sharp that constitutional experts are still debating the wider implications. In minutes, the atmosphere in British politics shifted from tense to volatile. And then, at exactly 2:15 p.m, the confrontation escalated again. Sadiq Khan called an emergency press conference outside City Hall, and witnesses say the language he used landed with a chill. Standing before a dense wall of microphones, jaw clenched and face flushed, he declared that nobody dictates how the democratically elected Mayor of London runs the city. Not unelected advisors, not aristocrats clinging to ancient privileges, and certainly not the monarchy. The words hit like a match thrown into dry grass. The response, reports suggest, was immediate and devastating. Within hours, senior palace figures speaking anonymously described the king as privately appalled by what they viewed as open defiance. Sources inside Buckingham Palace painted an atmosphere of controlled fury, the kind that doesn't erupt loudly but moves decisively. According to multiple accounts circulating among royal correspondents, emergency conversations were held throughout the day, and the message from the top was clear. The next steps would be calm, deliberate, and punishing in their precision. The gloves were coming off. This was no longer routine politics. This had become constitutional warfare. But stay with me, because there is another layer to this confrontation that makes it even more combustible. The specific flashpoint, according to reports, centres on London's handling of royal ceremonial routes and long-standing processions, symbols that the palace sees as inseparable from the identity of the capital itself. City Hall had reportedly proposed rerouting key elements of the annual Lord Mayor's show away from historic pathways used for centuries, citing modern traffic and logistical pressures. But palace historians, sources say, did not buy the explanation. They allegedly believed it wasn't just about congestion, it was about slowly removing visible royal tradition from public life in the capital, one technical adjustment at a time. And the King's letter, it's claimed, referenced multiple incidents over recent months in which royal ceremonial permissions were blocked, delayed, or tightened in ways the palace found unacceptable. One incident reportedly involved restrictions placed on trooping the colour rehearsal routes. Another allegedly saw requests for street closures linked to a Commonwealth reception refused outright. The third, described by insiders as the most politically dangerous, was an internal suggestion attributed to City Hall that royal processions should be scaled back to reflect modern democratic values. That exact phrase, sources claim, appeared in a memo that made its way into the press, and when palace officials reportedly saw those words, the reaction was not confusion, it was resolve. The king, according to accounts now circulating, marked the phrase and wrote a blunt instruction in the margin. This stops now. Now here's where the public anger comes flooding in, because while this battle plays out at the top, millions are watching through the lens of everyday struggle. Veterans are waiting months for care. Pensioners are staring down bills that don't match their fixed incomes. Working Londoners are being squeezed from every direction. Rent, council tax, energy costs, and the mood is turning darker by the week. One widely repeated example involves a 72-year-old former army nurse forced to wait months for a hip replacement, living in constant pain after years of service. And against that backdrop, critics have seized on reported spending at City Hall. Consultants, initiatives, and high-salary roles that many voters now see as disconnected from the hardship on the ground. The contrast has become morally and politically toxic, especially among people who once defended the mayor's priorities. Across London, pensioners are reportedly being hit with council tax rises that feel like punishment for simply surviving. One elderly widow's account of skipping meals to afford heating has been cited repeatedly as a symbol of how quickly dignity can collapse when the numbers stop adding up. People who worked their entire lives, paid in, played by the rules, are now being told to manage, while they watch six-figure salaries and vague administrative roles expand across government structures. For many, it doesn't feel like governance anymore. It feels like a machine that keeps growing while the public is asked to shrink. And in moments like this, anger doesn't simmer, it spreads. Then, according to reports, something truly extraordinary happened. King Charles is said to have broken with long-standing royal restraint in a move that constitutional scholars are already debating as one of the most significant assertions of royal authority in generations. At a Privy Council meeting inside Buckingham Palace, insiders claim His Majesty delivered what they described as a masterclass in institutional power, calm in voice, but charged with unmistakable force. London belongs to all Britons, not the political agenda of one man, he reportedly said. And the subtext, according to those who understand these rooms, was unmistakable. This wasn't advice, it was a line in the sand. Palace sources further claim the king personally pushed for stronger language than advisors recommended, rejecting softer phrasing in favour of direct rebuke. One senior courtier, speaking anonymously to the press, allegedly summed up the mood in a sentence. His Majesty has had enough, the patience is gone. And for the mayor, the optics are catastrophic, because when the Crown itself publicly challenges your leadership, it stops being a bad news cycle and becomes a legitimacy crisis. Every interview becomes a trap, every policy becomes a referendum, every public appearance becomes a battlefield, and it didn't stop at words. Reports now suggest the palace activated rarely used constitutional mechanisms that increase oversight of decisions tied to London's historic character and ceremonial governance, frameworks that legal historians trace back centuries. Analysts are still dissecting what this could mean in practice, but early assessments circulating in commentary circles suggest the mayor's office could face direct scrutiny over major ceremonial rulings and high-profile proposals. Not an abolition of authority, something more surgical, a visible curtailment, a tightening of the space to manoeuvre, carried out through procedures that already exist but have sat dormant for generations. If true, it would be a strategic outflanking, using tradition to restrain a leadership accused of weakening tradition. The ripple effects, observers say, were immediate. Market chatter claimed the pound moved on the perception of incoming stability, an early signal that investors were reading the intervention as a clampdown on political risk. Opposition MPs, sensing vulnerability, launched coordinated attacks across television and print. High-profile figures framed the moment as the Crown stepping in where elected institutions had failed to act. Inside Labour, the story reportedly created instant fractures, with moderates pushing distance between themselves and a standoff that could drag the party into a national credibility crisis. Online, pro-monarchy hashtags surged, and images from demonstrations outside City Hall began circulating at speed, Union Jacks raised, chants rising, and headlines writing themselves. International reaction, too, has been framed as swift. Commentators across the Commonwealth debated what the clash signals about constitutional stability, with leaders and analysts emphasising the monarchy's symbolic role as a stabilising force. American networks dissected the drama like a political thriller, with analysts asking the blunt question, why would any politician willingly ignite a public confrontation with the Crown when the optics are so unforgiving? And as the pressure mounts, from public anger, party politics, media framing, and institutional power, one reality is becoming harder to ignore. This is no longer just about ceremonial routes or processions. It is about control. It is about control, legitimacy, and the future boundaries of authority in Britain. So now the country is holding its breath, because if reports are accurate, the next phase won't be loud, it will be methodical. And when power moves quietly, it often moves the fastest. Keep your eyes on what happens next, because in a standoff like this, one document, one vote, one ruling, or one leaked memo can change everything overnight.